Thank you, Daniel, for joining me here tonight.
My pleasure.
I would like to tell you about a vision I had in my sleep last night.
Mm.
A vision is distinguished from a dream, which is a mere sorting and cataloguing of the day's events by the subconscious. This was a vision, fresh and clear as a mountain stream, the mind revealing itself to itself. In my vision, I was huddled in a dark space inside a chest of drawers or some similar sort of clothing storage device. Through a peephole emanated some dim, yet gleaming and radiant light. I'd known this place. In fact, I'd been born and raised there. Placing my eyes against the hole, I shallowed my breathing. Through the hole, I saw the vivid but unmistakable form of my beautiful 33-year-old mother, naked, kneading her breast in the way that women do. I felt no fear, merely curiosity, as I observed the kneading, unceasing, as though she was attempting to form her breast into a dough of some sort of leavened bread. There came a knock at the door. My mother opened it, and I saw you standing there, muscular as primetime Hulk Hogan, with a rugged, handsome face of early 1970s Chris Christopherson. Your erection was proud and stiff as a temple pagoda, albeit one of particularly high and angular proportions. You stood next to an American $1 bill as you entered the room, so I could easily infer your size was only slightly under 5 inches. As you ploughed my fair and lovely young mother, you repeatedly pulled your arms upwards in a muscle man-style flex, occasionally leaning over to kiss your bicep. Then our eyes met, somehow, across this dim room and through this small hole. You held up your finger as though it was a pistol, pointed at me, winked, and mouthed the sound of a shooting gun. I awoke with a tremendous sense of optimism and confidence in you and your future. That was my vision. It was of you. I'm so glad to have had this opportunity to share it with you. I wish you nothing but the very best, always.
That's not how I remember the first chapter of the book.
Have you read this book?
Have I read this book?
Have you read
from
this
cover
book?
to cover? I actually have read it from cover to cover once before in my life.
Lucky devil. All right. Well, welcome to the welcome to the first time we've ever talked about Mishima in person ever.
Yeah.
In fact, we will be talking Mishima for until the end of history at this rate, reiterating the same topics over and over again. As he himself did in every book that he wrote.
Mm-hmm. The really good thing about this is at least it's all distilled into sort of 100 pages. 100.
Absolutely. It keeps it brief.
Yeah.
So we are reading Yukio Mishima's The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea, and annotating it on a chapter by chapter basis.
That's right.
But
we've got the same book.
Correct. We do have the same book. It's always worth checking. I think we have a, here's something I prepared earlier, a bit of a brief history of the writer we know as Yukio Mishima. Check name later, says the notes here. Kimitake Hiraoka was born in 1925. His mother was part of the samurai family, the Hashi. His grandmother removed him from his mother's care at a young age. She was also descended from a samurai family, but a more senior daimyo family, who were one of the criminal warlords that ran Japan for 800 years that everybody romanticizes in Western literature. The grandmother was very much a fallen aristocrat by that point. Her role was basically just taking care of the children. He had a very strange upbringing under his grandmother. He wasn't allowed to socialize with boys. He wasn't allowed to do any sport. Wasn't allowed to leave the house to go into sunlight. So he spent a lot of time with his younger cousins, who were all girls, playing dolls with them. He was returned to his family at age 12. His dad sounded like a nut who saw literature as effeminate. At one point, he held child Mishima up to a speeding train as it went past for some sort of life lesson. Mishima's mother protected him and was a lot more supportive to his writing. All the writing Mishima did as a young person was in secret, and he only told his mother about it. The name Yukio Mishima is an alias that he adopted to hide his work from his father. He was first published at 16, graduated school in September of 1944, and he met the emperor at the ceremony. The emperor gave him a watch and congratulated him on finishing top of his class. He was drafted in April 1944 as a second-class conscript. His physical fitness wasn't sufficient enough to meet the criteria of first-class conscript. He also had a cold on his enlistment day. The doctor misdiagnosed it as tuberculosis, so he was declared unfit for military service. In August 1945, Japan surrenders. This freaks the shit out of Mishima. He listens to the surrender speech on the radio and apparently has an episode afterwards. He graduates from uni in 1945, becomes a bureaucrat for the Ministry of Finance. He doesn't like it, has a mental breakdown again. His father agrees to support his literary career, presumably just to get him out of the house. He starts writing his early work in the post-war period of Japan. His writing shows that he was very much shaped by this period and the US occupation. But I also think that the surrender and the occupation by the Americans had a deleterious effect on his mental state in general. He remained politically fairly non-committal. He did have a disdain for leftists, but that was because, from what I understand from my research, leftists controlled a lot of the literary media in the country, and people who became leftists who were previously non-political, he resented that and saw it as an easy way to get published, rather than a genuine switch of ideological belief. At the same time, he's researching gay bars for a novel named Forbidden Colours. He's suspected of having homosexual relationships during this period, but he's also married to Yoko Hirooka, who stays his wife his entire life. In 1955, he takes up bodybuilding, and his physique develops, and so his confidence also subsequently develops. He becomes an actor and a model in the 1960s. He's not a very good actor. He's an alright model, I suppose, for a guy who sits down and gets photos taken of him. I have seen him in a couple of films. He's very wooden. He's not very expressive. In the late 60s, he starts becoming more focused on nationalism, particularly on a revanchist nostalgia of the samurai period with an anti-capitalist bent. This ideology was more predicated on his perceived erosion of Japanese cultural identity through capitalism rather than because of a genuine economic response. He develops a series of grandiose plans as time goes on. He initially wants to create a paramilitary National Guard unit, but no one was really interested in that. So he instead forms a small private militia of about 50 people called the Tatenokai. This group is mostly focused on physical fitness. They do training with the Japanese SDF to learn how to use guns, do physical exercises and so on. He enlisted as well, did the training under his original name. Allegedly, nobody knew who he was, which probably says wonders to his recognition through his film career. Then we get to November of 1970, where he and four of the other members of the Tatenokai visit a military base in Tokyo. They take the Lieutenant General in charge hostage and assemble and address the soldiers of the base with a manifesto written by Mishima. The soldiers ignore him, mock him, laugh at him, tell him to shut up, has an argument with them midway through reading out the manifesto, then eventually just flings his hands up and says, fuck it, and goes and commits seppuku. For those uninitiated in the mysteries, seppuku is a process where one slices their own belly with a tanto sword, and then someone cuts your head off to spare the pain of having eviscerated yourself. Unfortunately for Mishima, after doing the first part, the Tatenokai cadre just couldn't get the head off, and it took four cuts to chop it off. So in what I can only imagine to be incredible pain, Mishima dies a miserable death, age 45. Wasn't that great? Aren't you fully informed about this person who we know as Yukio Mishima?
Absolutely.
His life, his death, his loves, and definitely not his homosexuality.
And I also definitely knew that Yukio Mishima was a pseudonym.
Yes, you did. So this edition was translated by John Nathan. I did talk to you about John Nathan. He seems like a cool guy. Met Mishima in '63, wanted him to become the Nobel Prize winning translator for all of his works, but pissed off Mishima by finding one of his many rivals and translating one of his works instead, and Mishima cut him off. So this is his only book that he translated for Mishima, but I think he did a fairly good job. I think it's, I mean, most of the translators of these are pretty good. I think that this one in particular it captured the evocative quality of his language.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really have a baseline to compare it to, but with the big authors, you don't generally find poor translations of it, but
Well, yeah,
it
do with
certainly was.
Mishima. I'll tell you,
Really,
there are pretty shittily translated
we
books
should
that
do
I'm sure
a
we'll get to at some
we
point.
should do one of them.
Oh, well, they're not all bad, but there's some that are just shocking. Anyway, so it was written in 1963, translated in 1965. You think set in early 50s,
Mid 50s, I think. Yeah, that sounds
mid
about right to
50s.
me.
So during 1963, it was the height of the economic miracle that was happening in Japan. The economic miracle was effectively a 5-year plan funded entirely by the US government to create a technological counter to the rest of the rapidly
Yeah,
industrializing East.
yeah, but also to create a market for US goods. For a consumer market, you need consumers with money, and it was consistent with United States' activities in Europe as well, which was to try to rebuild the industrial bases of countries that either the USA itself had dismantled or were dismantled by Nazi Germany during the war. But you're right. There was also an element of Cold War not wanting to give socialists in the West or the East any more excuses to be heading down the path of communism.
Mm. Well, it worked very successfully. No one fell to communism in Southeast
Yeah,
Asia after that. Definitely no wars were fought that were completely inconclusive for capitalism. So interesting time in Japan. It was the height, or not the height, but the continuation of the AMPO protests about the US continued occupation of Japan through their military bases and their quasi unrecognized governorship of Okinawa.
still
Um,
ongoing to this day. There's still
well, I think the American it's not ruled, but if you're an American who rapes someone there,
yeah,
you're pretty much scot
yeah,
free. But apart from that, this is the period of the massive growth of the middle class in Japan that went from a sort of I don't know how you describe the pre-war imperial economy. It was sort of like quasi-feudal, but it wasn't really. It was more like it was like a gangster state, effectively, um,
yeah,
where
yeah.
the Zaibatsus controlled vast resources. They sort of were the economic inheritors of the daimyo class, and very few of them controlled a large proportion of Japanese economy, had light industry, and then it became focused more on heavy industry and electronics.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose like it had a lot of parallels with Imperial Germany, like in any state that was trying to rapidly industrialize. They all had this feature of the government itself picking winners, trying to cartelize heavy industry to sort of drive efficiency in those areas, but it meant that large areas of the rest of the economy were left fairly neglected. So in Germany's case, that was pretty poor agricultural practices. And in Japan, aside from the fact that a lot of their land just wasn't very arable because it's so mountainous, yeah, once again, like at that small and medium level of manufacturing, a lot of it was just don't have workshops, very, very dispersed geographically. There is another thing
Yeah,
I wanted just to remark on because this is a book about sailors in the sea, which is and this sort of feeds into the context. So, and I think it was 52 or 53. The United States signed a treaty with Japan, and that effectively let Japan sail internationally again, so they could actually conduct merchant marine activities, with other countries. They didn't just have to engage in coastal shipping.
a
Um,
constitutional
and
block,
yeah,
the constitution that the Americans wrote
yeah, yeah,
and forced upon Japan after World War II, that's still going. Like you still see arguments. Shinzo Abe was very against the constitution and the limitation on trade and development of military
mm,
industry
mm,
specifically, and ability to have an army. Like the SDF is the
yeah,
army, but they can't call it an army, and it can't do things an army does because America says they shouldn't.
Yeah, yeah, and that formed part of that weird little militia that Mishima wanted to put together. Was it was supposed to mirror the STF and provide basically a reserve army behind the self defense reserve army, if that makes sense. But with I guess my the thing I wanted to say about Japan as well is it always has been a maritime nation. Its fate and its I guess its fortune has always been linked with the sea. You know, there's the what do they call it when the divine wind when Chinggis Khan tried to
Oh yeah,
invade.
the one that blew up all the boats in.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But you know, the
You
idea.
get one of those,
Yeah.
I think, in history of a country. You get one opportunity to prevent an invader
Yeah.
via cyclone.
Well, one of the reasons Japan was able to develop its navy to such an extent by 1930, also 1941, let's just say that for Pearl Harbor. One of the reasons it was able to do that is because it had always been a maritime nation. It wasn't difficult to go and get sailors
No,
because
lots of
like
fishermen.
there was sort of like yeah, there was just, like so many people could just sail. Everyone knew what it meant to be on the
Mm.
water, and this is I guess like a theme that sort of run through this book is almost like the naturalness of this occupational vocation
Yeah,
that
and
yeah,
it's the simple escapism rather than climbing the mountain. You get on the boat. That's the way to escape your life. You don't you don't leave through any other mechanism apart from getting on a boat and going to another land, which happens to be part of your same country, or merchant mariner wherever. Should we get into this chapter about
yeah.
this annoying child who I despise?
You don't like him.
He's not very likable, I don't think.
He's not very likable, but I think he's just anyway. I think he's just a teenager,
Well,
a nasty
an
teenager.
unpleasant teenager.
Very
So, do you want to
unpleasant.
give
Anyway,
a
I'll,
rundown of what occurs in this chapter?
okay. I'll give the brief. This should be the 15-second pitch on what happened. So there's this young boy. His name's Noboru. He's about I think he's 12 or 13. Is that right? About 12 or 13. So he's
A 13.
just coming into puberty, one assumes, or somewhere thereabouts. He has a mother. His father is a beautiful 33-year-old mother with some very weirdly described breasts. I couldn't quite make out the shape, but we'll get back to that in a second. Um, the father is absent from the picture. He died. I don't think it's really explained how, but we can assume it's probably war related. And then there is another character who comes in. This is the sailor, and I guess we'll talk about him more when we go through, the how Noboru and this sailor meet. But essentially, what this chapter is about is this young boy who works out that he can see inside his mother's room from his room, and he uses that opportunity to watch her undress and then also in this chapter have sex with the sailor.
I think back to the breasts. I think he's pretty clear what he means. That she's basically got nipples that point skew if.
Skew is in like outwards.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, okay.
that's the impression I got. That it was like she's got boobs that point outwards, and it's like there's a lot of emphasis on the tit, and this is why I think he's probably not gay because he loves a tit, he loves the
Mm.
boobs. There's always fixation on boobs whenever he talks about having sex with women. Bisexual, maybe, but I don't
Mm.
think straight gay. A man who loves tits that much could not be gay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was just more just trying to picture her breasts in my mind, but I think I've got them now. It just seemed like a very roundabout way of describing them. I've never thought of breasts in that way. But anyway,
Yeah, well
her
that
haughty breasts inclined sharply away from her
well
body.
no, haughty is in perky. That's what I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
haughty. Ah, that's what. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I thought haughty meant like a little bit, you know, big as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I'm not as good as an author as Mishima. I'm not as good as descriptions as you saw in my previous
Should have
little
just drawn them for us.
um drawing a boob and then getting an erection and having to leave the room. we should probably get to themes before I lose
Yeah.
my train of thought. So I think one of the major themes of this is evil children and how children are evil
Mm.
and can be evil, and the evil is so thoughtless as to its consequence that almost inhumane, almost like animalistic. You know, why'd you do it? Just because I could do it? Because I knew it would hurt someone.
Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
sort of ambiguous as to whether him spying on his mother is to hurt her, curiosity, or some sort of perversion that falls outside of that. But there's certainly like an acknowledgement that whatever it is, whatever unknown feeling he has, it's wrong in some way and it's shameful.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing is wrong, but I think part of the motivation of this is this thing, like he is on the cusp of puberty. It seems like, this what's this where she says, it's time you stop coming into mother's room so often with that
Mm.
excuse about wanting to watch the ships. You're not a child anymore, dear. Like, I think part of it as well is he's losing his childhood, and then what's replacing that is just this sort of like,
Yeah, his mother's getting a bit worn out by the
yeah,
pretensions of I am a child, so therefore I should be able to get
yeah.
away with this sort of thing.
He's been cut from the tip, I think, and
Yeah,
he's that's part of what's driving his annoyance and anger towards his mother is that he's still being treated like a child. By the way, like, note that he gets locked in his room every night.
yeah, and there is the sort of internal conflict between personal confidence in one's own ability, a growing awareness of your ability and your intelligence,
Hmm.
but at the same time, your impotence as a child, and sexual impotence in this case, in that he's literally witnessing someone have sex with his mother.
Yeah,
Um, it does. I think that feeds into, he can say he's convinced of his own genius. Each of the others in the gang felt the same way, which, as he says in his book, I think that his introspective thoughts and his sort of very simplistic view of existentialism uh, is more precocious than you get for a general 13-year-old, but at the same time, it's pretty contemptible. It's sort of the sort of thing you say, do you really believe that? Or is that something that you think is cool to say? And he wouldn't really have an answer.
mm. Yeah, and it's also difficult to work out. Well, I mean, so we're skipping a little bit ahead in the book, but it's also difficult as it goes on to work out which of these ideas are being transmitted from his sort of friend, like his gang of like these nasty little freaks that he hangs out with, or whether these are sort of bubbling up from within him. I think certainly the way he described his feelings when he's watching his mum get railed by the sailor, that certainly seems to be coming from within. I think that's as close to passion as he's going to feel for a while, I think.
I think that he's probably a kid who's a bit smarter than his friends, is the impression I get, and probably a bit smarter than the adults that he deals with in post-war Japan, who would have been pretty poorly educated. But at the same time, he's got a very Manichaean view of the world, as you do at 13. There's sin and virtue, and there's not really anything in between. There's no gray area. It's very, like, I'm not saying that the stuff that I read about this and from his perspective isn't something that's universally experienced by most young boys. I think, especially if you feel that you're smarter or you're precocious in some way, you would feel a similar way with regard to people being idiots or, people being stupid or whatever, not
Yeah,
really having the context of what that means with regard to yourself because you're just a child, you don't
yeah.
have a full understanding of the world.
I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we tried to pretend that we weren't also like horrible as children. Like, I think most teen boys are awful, very
Mm,
self-centered, mean. Mean to the point of like this sort of carelessness you see, like when a cat catches a baby bird or a mouse or something. Just this sort of
yeah.
indifference towards other people's feelings, and
I think
certainly
that
Noboro.
I just think that this kid I think he is a bad kid. I think he knows he's a bad kid because he does things that intentionally would
Mm,
be bad and annoying. And, it isn't just the looking at your mum in the nude or, while she's in flagrante. It's stuff like demanding to be taken out to the boats. And his
Mm.
mother, doting mother, does so, takes him out there, introduces him to the handsome sailors, which is where she meets Ryuji, who is the sailor, um, of a last name that I can't recall off the top of my head. But yeah, there is, and there's a certain fascination with Ryuji that Noboru holds. I sort of class as quasi-sexual because there's a lot of emphasis on his physical appearance and
Mm.
his it does seem somewhat lustful, but then in context, he doesn't have he lost his father when he was 8, probably doesn't remember what he looked like. Doesn't really have a baseline to compare it to because he doesn't have a lot of male figures around him. He sort of just hangs out with his mum and his schoolyard mates, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he doesn't really have a baseline. So seeing someone who's, very tanned and very muscular and very confident in their
Yeah, and
self.
that's what he wants for himself, right?
Well, I don't know. I just think that it's a shock to the system because he's met someone who's alien, effectively alien, right?
Mm.
Ryuji would be someone who it would be unexpected, and unexpectedly forceful. This bloke that you just met has insinuated himself in your life. Looks completely different to anyone else you know, and talks completely differently to anyone else you know, and is of a different social class to anyone else that you know or you deal with
Mm-hmm.
as a little fancy boy in the Japanese version of Fauntleroy's Academy.
Yes, and because I mean that's the part we skipped over just earlier was that he's also his family has means. His mother is in some sort of trading business, and seems to have acquired quite a refined taste in fashion and knickknacks and that sort of stuff. So like yeah, he's not sort of on the bones of his ass. He is a bit of a fancy boy, I think, and you know I think it's quite a common story when the father dies. Often the mother's attention turns towards the boy who they seek, who they want to, in some respects, replace the father. But there are certain things that obviously that cannot replace, and this is where the sailor comes in.
That's right,
He
and
has
there's
to be
also
able
the
to.
repulsion at the difference. This is the alien. I'm repulsed by him on the grounds of the fact that he is so different and
Mm,
so not what I'm used to, that the kid seemingly takes a disliking to him. Um, I do find it funny that the mum takes him out, gets him pissed, gets the sailor pissed, brings him home, has him talk to the kid for half an hour, and then realizes that, oh, it's getting a bit late. He's probably gonna he's probably gonna either go, or get weirded out by having to talk to a kid. Puts the kid upstairs in his room, and then afterwards goes and roots him, just to keep him around. There does seem to be a sense of authentic, like pragmatism to that. There's
hmm
not much romantic quality to it.
I thought it was. I thought it was quite a nice scene, actually.
Well, I think the mum wants a root, and
Yeah,
that's very. I think that's very honest to be like, well, I'm just a single woman who wants to have sex with someone. Is that too much to ask? Just let me do it. But of course, it's spoiled because the kid's watching through his little creep hole. Not that my parents were divorced or deceased, but I've certainly been around enough people who have been single mothers who just want to root,
yeah,
who have to introduce the person to their child, so the
yeah,
child doesn't wake up and say, "Who the fuck is this person in my house?" and
yeah.
freak out.
This is somewhat familiar to me. Yeah.
Um, so, are there any other themes that you want to delve into
There's
here?
just a few little, just I mean, his way with words is lovely. Describing describing the erection as the lustrous temple tower soaring triumphantly erect.
Oh, I did love that.
That was good. I liked also like when he's sort of talking about like the shape that they were making when they were having sex. You know, pitch black and glabrous as a whale's back. You're right. Probably the having a good translator benefits is ever so more because it's a novella, so you've really got to pack as much as possible in. I thought this is a very descriptive chapter, and I felt like after reading it, I got quite a clear picture of the house and where they lived, and I can see Noboru in my mind, and I can see the mother in my mind, and I can sort of see the sailor a bit as well. Like I feel like this is established for us, and then not wanting to spoil it, but as you go through the rest of the book, those themes that he establishes in chapter one, he sort of just keeps on just drawing them through each other chapter, and it becomes stronger and stronger, and you get a stronger feeling about things, not just about sort of like uh, adolescence and what it's like to be a teen. But there's also this theme. I don't think we've touched on it yet, but like the theme of humiliation, and this isn't just about Noboru seeing his mum get fucked, but it's also, I think, the broader humiliation of Mishima and the Japanese people
Yeah.
post-war.
I think humiliation and dignity, though. Like, you can't. I think that's the problem. Like, as I said previously, I was trying to find clips of Mishima that I could take out of context to be humorous, or speeches that I could then read out that would be funny. But there's nothing, because he's the most dignified man on the planet, or was the most dignified man on the planet. Nothing he wrote or said, even though what he did was fucking ludicrous, was in any way mockable. Like, he's just so dignified in his words and confident in them that it's like, well, I can't rebut the argument because it's coming from a place of personal opinion. And I can't be like, oh, this is ridiculous, even if it is on its face ridiculous, as the coup was, as his bodybuilding, his vanity projects with the SDF, ludicrous, ridiculous. His acting career, it's stuff that you would laugh about, but then you hear him do interviews about it, or you hear him talking about it, and you're like, okay, well, it makes sense when you explain it like that, because the way he explains it is that he's got total and full belief in what he's doing, and that fully comes across. He's someone who has never ever dealt with irony as we understand it in the modern sense.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly.
Everything was intentional, and everything that he did had an argument attached to it to counter any argument that anyone would come up about it.
Yeah,
Which, admirable, totally admirable. Is a supremely interesting figure for a lot of reasons, but I think to be a figure who's absurd as he is, but to have the dignity that people can't laugh about it.
yeah. But this also goes to, I think, most people, there is some sort of internal logic to how they conduct themselves and live their lives. I think for Mishima, though, he was actually able to explain it. He was able to articulate what he was doing and why he was doing it. I think for a lot of people, things can make sense inside their head. They just sort of can't explain why. I don't think many people sort of do things just for no reason or for a silly reason, because you see later in this book, once again, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but Noboru, everything he does is internalized and rationalized and
Yeah,
justified.
rationalized, but in an immature way,
Yes.
and in a thoughtless way, I find. But that's good too. I think having consistency of view, which Mishima's quite good at doing. He's quite good. He's good at doing the internal aspect. So you have a stream of consciousness that's not incoherent. You have a rational stream of consciousness, and he's good at having people who have firm beliefs either slightly shift them or be vindicated for staying true to those beliefs
Mm.
throughout the book. And I think that's that's more realistic, I think, than anything else that he writes. He writes not very fantastical works, but a lot of people do live their lives by these principles, even if they are ridiculous and stupid. And he certainly is someone who did. And I think that's probably why people admire him and are drawn to him. That's not the reason I'm drawn to him. I'm drawn to him because he's a wonderful writer. He can emote and create an emotive and comprehensive plot, specifically through people's interactions with one another within the plot rather than the plot itself, is great. That's what I want in a book. I want a book of entirely interpersonal relationships, which is exactly what he delivers.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And in this one, it's just lovely that it's all so easy to follow. There's only a few little characters to worry about. Actually, like most of his books, to be honest, well, the ones that I've read, don't have this sort of expansive cast of characters you need to keep track of. But this in particular, he's really really refined down this Noboru character to what is almost like an id, right? Like this, like a teenage id.
Yeah, I think so. But the plots are in all of his books, because they're quite short. You're right. Are very ordinary, everyday interactions with some exotic element that's a little outrageous, that you wouldn't deal with on an everyday basis, and sort of how you react to that. We might. I'm not going to say we might wrap it up there because I'll always say that. What is a better thing for us to say? In
Let's leave it
conclusion,
there.
let's leave it there.
Let's put
And
that book down.
And you, the listener, need to get this fucking book and read it.
Yeah, it's actually very short, but don't read ahead of.
It is short. You have no excuse. It's on this translation I'm reading. It is 143 pages. There is no excuse. Although if you can't read, that might be an excuse. In which case you can listen to us.
It took me like 20 minutes to do the first 2 chapters or something, and that was annotating while we went. So it's a nice read.
It is.
And I'm gonna
Listen to us while we talk about it. It doesn't matter. Or don't. I don't care. Listen to the transcription. Do whatever you want. No one's telling you to do shit.
Yeah,
No one's
just read
forcing
the
you.
Wikipedia article.
Fucking just grow up.
That's what I did before this.
Yeah, good. Good. All right. Bye.
All right, I'll see you, mate. Bye bye.